So it's no secret that, and this is the real joke, except it's sad but true, that numbers and Rabbi Jim Soloff don't really mix. Page numbers, the numbers of Israelites in the Torah at any given time, math in general, let's just say it's not pretty. And so, of course, it's with a little bit of trepidation on my end that I approach the next book of the Torah that we're starting when it's called the Book of Numbers. So I prefer the Hebrew title, Bamidbar, meaning in the wilderness, as in, for example, the Israelites have left Egypt, but they haven't arrived in the promised land yet, so they are Bamidbar, in the wilderness. Or, another example, Rabbi Jim would rather be lost Bamidbar than have to do simple math. So back to Numbers, it isn't just English that uses that name for the fourth book in the Torah. There's also, in rabbinic literature, a nickname for the book of Numbers, for Bamidbar, which is translated as the Book of Censuses, or Sefer HaPikudim, actually easier to say in the Hebrew. And all of this number naming is because in this week's Torah portion, the beginning of the book of Numbers, there is a census. And then again throughout the book, there's a number of times where the Israelites are counted. And obviously, for all of us, 2020 has been a significant year of counting people. Even before COVID-19, we were already in a census year, which, by the way, is absolutely crucial. Every single one of you better have filled out your census. And if you haven't, I want you to open a tab right now, go to 2020census.gov, and fill out your census. You'll be done soon, and no one will even know that you're not paying attention to Zoom anyway, and quite frankly, I'd rather you finish filling out the census than listen to me anyway. But beyond the census, which you better fill out, we have been obsessed for weeks and now months with counting people regarding coronavirus. And if we're going to be honest, we actually haven't been as obsessed as we should have been from the beginning. Being able to answer questions like, how many people really have the virus right now? How many people have had the virus truly? How many have passed? How many have survived and have antibodies? The only way, as we know, is to test and to count and to test and to count and to count and to test. And so in the midst of all of this truly crucial and unusual counting of people, let's take a brief look at what the Torah and Jewish tradition has to say about this subject of counting, especially when we talk about numbering and counting human beings. The census command that is in the book of Numbers reads like this: Take a census of the entire assembly of the children of Israel according to their families and according to their father's house by the number of the names. Every male according to their head count. Now, yes, I know the census is men only in Bamidbar, and that's because it has to do with military service and land allotment in the ancient Near East, but that's a conversation for Torah study. I want to back up and focus on that key expression, counting people by number of the names, Bamispar Shemos. It's somewhat peculiar. It's seemingly even oxymoronic to count by the number of the names, because the term number and the term names are, well, opposites. When we talk about numbers, we imply anonymity, like the phrase, I'm not just another number. But comparatively, when we talk about names, that has the opposite connotation, because a name gives a person singularity and a quality of being special. The prominent 20th century rabbi Mordecai Gifter put it like this: numbers, by their very definition, are finite. But a human being, by very definition, is not. A human being has a soul and unlimited potential to grow. This sentiment, captured in that quote, is part of why numbers and numbering people is not really accepted in Judaism. It's part of why when numbers were tattooed on people's arms during the Shoah, and they were given that number and taken away their name, that was an extra slap in the face for Jews because of this tradition of not numbering people. And in fact, this tradition is so strong that there is a custom throughout periods of Judaism to never number or count people for any reason. And so what do we do when we need to count, right? So how do we see if we have the 10 that we need for a minyan in a service? Well, you count the chairs that are full. Or what if you need to count a community census? What would you do if you weren't allowed to count people? Well, you have every single person in the community donate a single small denomination coin, and then you count the coins. So that works for some situations, but what about when you really need to count and get the people numbers down, like the 2020 census, which you had filled out, or even more crucially for us right now, really knowing those coronavirus numbers? Ultimately, it all goes back to that specific quote in the Torah. Count them by number of the names. Now, a common way that that phrase is interpreted is that in the Israelite census, people were not counted just numerically, but they actually counted and tracked every single person by name. And at this point, I'm actually going to shift into a pretty serious space, and I hope that you'll comfortably come with me for this, because this is a moment in time where the Torah has proven once again that it knows how to bring us the right lesson at the right time. Because take just a moment to think about what our news feeds would be like if we as a community were taking the time regularly to count by name in this crisis. What if we were taking the time to not just say 95,906 Americans have passed from COVID-19, but we took the time to list out names, or even just a few names, like George Siegel, Darlene Kimball, Wanda Bailey. Those are not anybody that I knew personally. Those are probably not people that you know personally. But putting a name on just a couple of those numbers suddenly makes 95,906 a lot more personal. And in fact, as Jews, I want to take this another direction. Imagine if instead of reading the names for the mourner's Kaddish, for Yahrzeit, or the people who have recently passed, imagine if I were to just say, 27 people passed this week in years past, and 4 people have passed in the last 30 days. We would never do that. Everything is lost when you go to just a number. If you want another example, consider that Monday is Memorial Day. I want you to think of any war monument that you have ever seen by which you felt something. And right now, whether you're thinking about the plaque on the rock in Glen Rock for World War I, or whether you're thinking about the Vietnam War Memorial in DC, when you think of what is on those monuments, it's not a number of soldiers who perished, it's names. So as we continue to be inundated with numbers right now, these important numbers related to COVID-19, let's resist the easy pass of just seeing numbers. Instead, let's never forget that every number is a name, a story, a human being of limitless potential. And for too many, COVID-19 cut that potential short before their time was up, like Ron Golden, who was 56, Lee Green, who was 49, or Shoshana Davis, who was only 35. Further, many of those who got sick or passed from this disease never even had their names counted because they were never officially tested, and so they'll never be a part of that list. Let's especially remember as well that if we had done better in testing and counting names and thinking of human beings earlier, if we had done better at being more quick to be socially distanced, to quarantine, then we would actually have fewer names to say. And further, I pray that we will not make that mistake now. 1,286 names were added yesterday to the list of individuals whose lives were cut short by coronavirus in the United States, and around the world yesterday was 4,467. Every single one, a name, a soul, a life. Shouldn't we want to keep this particular accounting as short as possible? Isn't it worth the inconvenience of quarantine and social distancing and protective covering to keep that list short? I'll answer the question. It's not just that it's worth it, it's our obligation to do so. Our collective actions have and will continue to be the deciding factor of how many names are added to the list of COVID-19 fatalities. So, as states, including ours, loosen restrictions, as place that we want to go so badly, we want to get out of here and go to the beach, to the restaurant, to the store. And yes, I'm at the top of this list. Go back to Temple Avodat Shalom. As we start to face those possibilities, let's remember what Judaism teaches us, number one, above everything else. Human life is sacred. Human life is sacred. That's why we can't be limited to a number. That's why we have to continue the inconveniences of quarantine, social distancing, and protective covering for as much as we can stand, for as long as we can stand it. As the Torah teaches us, Uvaharta b'chaim b'ma'an tichyeh, choose life so that we, all of us, may live. Ken Yehi Ratzon, may it be so.